3, 2.
The college football season has already begun, and this week the National Football League begins its 100th year of competition. Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm James Freeman of the Wall Street Journal, and today on Fox Nation we are looking at the state of the game. And we're fortunate to have three guests who know the territory. Eric Coleman is a former professional football player, now the New York Jets late night analyst on CBS, and also the Vice President of Executive Benefits for USI Insurance. Clay Travis is a journalist, television analyst, morning radio show host for nationwide Fox Sports Radio, and author of Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. Okay, we'll have to ask about that as we go. And Marvin Washington is a retired NFL player who played a total of 11 years with 3 teams and is a Super Bowl champion, and also an NFL League ambassador for Athletes for Care, where he sits on the board of directors. Thanks to all of you for joining us today as we kick off this season. And this is a sport, obviously not without controversy the last few years, but on this sort of milestone 100th season of the NFL, I think it makes sense to ask where the game is now. What does it mean to the country, and what is its future? I guess we might want to start out talking to the former players about what football has meant to them. Eric, probably a lot of things, but when you think about football in your life, what comes to mind?
Well, football has done so much for me in my life. It gave me the opportunity to provide for my family. It continues to provide for my family. Taught me a lot of lessons about life. And, it's just one of those gifts that just keeps giving. Football gave me a lot of tools that prepared me for life after football, how to communicate with people, teamwork, the value of hard work, and it's a wonderful game.
Well, I remember a few years ago, John Harbaugh, the coach of the Baltimore Ravens, talked about how he thinks it's unique in terms of character building. Not that you can't learn things from other sports. Do you think that's true, or could you get a lot of those lessons in other ways?
Absolutely. You think about the idea of running full speed and tackling someone. That goes against anything that your body tells you to do. But you have to face those fears. You have to fight through injury. You have to learn how to work with others. There's a lot of things that you have to face in football that when life comes at you, you've been to this before. I feel great working under pressure because I've been in those high pressure situations. Now in the real world, I feel comfortable there.
And Marvin, similar takeaway for you from your years playing the game?
Of course, and I think Eric kind of touched on it, like the life lessons that it gives you. And that's one thing that Jim Harbaugh was talking about, the physicality, being with your teammate, overcoming obstacles, and working through adversity. And the thing is that life is tough, but football teaches you, like if you get knocked down, get back up again, play one more play, because you have your family and your kids and what have you that you're responsible for. And to be a responsible adult in this society, in general society, I think football gives you so many wonderful life lessons that you can overcome anything and never, ever give up.
And Clay, you're covering this on a day-to-day basis. Do you have a thought on what it means to the country? Obviously, it is an American game. There are a lot of sports that they play everywhere, but this is distinctly American.
I think it's the national soundtrack for sports. And I think in a time when everybody is being sliced and diced into smaller, different identities based on race, gender, ethnicity, religion, all these things that divide us, I still love that come Monday morning when the neurosurgeon sits down in the hospital cafeteria next to the janitor, they can talk as equals, regardless of whatever else background they might have, about what the local teams did over the weekend, over those games. And so I just think that is so important to have common areas where everybody connects, and it sort of becomes the soundtrack of American sports. And I think that's what football has come to represent, and I don't see it going away anytime soon.
Well, you mentioned a neurosurgeon. I guess that brings us to the health concerns. Obviously, a lot of coverage, Marvin, the last few years of the concussion risks, and this is related to the work you're doing with Athletes for Care in terms of figuring out for people who do have issues from the game and from other sports how to get them the best treatment.
Well, the thing is that anybody in contact sport, they're going to have the closed head injury, which is a concussion or what have you. And I believe that some of the science that is shown to be in hemp plant, in CBD, because the government has a patent 6630507, says that CBD
this is
acts as an antioxidant.
a component of marijuana.
It's a component of hemp,
Of hemp,
which our Constitution was written on hemp, which our first ships and sailboats, they're all built with hemp. Levi Strauss' first jeans were built with hemp. This country was powered by hemp for a couple of centuries. We got away from it, and I believe now we're getting back to it. But on the science side, I believe it can go a long ways into solving the closed head injury, because it actually has a mini helmet for the brain. And the father of this is Dr. Raphael Meshulam over in Israel, and he says that if somebody gets a concussion within an hour, if they get a massive amount of CBD, it mitigates the symptoms of it. So the NFL has done over 400 safety rule changes. I believe the next moonshot for them is to look at CBD as a curant for concussions, because I want football to be safe to be played at all levels.
Okay, now, but about those, you said I didn't realize it was 400 rules changes.
Yes.
And I notice it at youth levels that coaching has definitely changed in terms of avoiding use of the head, use of the helmet. But from your perspective, has it become a much safer game or not really?
It's become a much safer game. Here's the thing, if you want to talk about the 100th anniversary of the NFL, 100 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt was talking about killing football at all levels, because there were so many deaths, and so football put in the forward pass, got rid of the scrum, and it got safer. I believe we're right there right now in the 21st century to make the game safer, but it's not going to be like Eric Knight played, because the game evolves. So I can see linemen being at a permanent 2-point stance. I can see them defensive linemen backed off the stance, and that's the way it's going to be.
2-point, meaning they're just on their feet. They're not
just on their feet. They're not in 3-point stance, and the linemen are going to be backed off, so they don't have that helmet-to-helmet contact each and every play. So the game is going to be safer. And when I go out and speak about football, I'm not trying to kill football. I'm only trying to make it safer.
Right.
And Eric, I guess related to that, I think there was. It seems that the concussion risk is it's obviously a continuing concern, but maybe not. The coverage doesn't seem to be as intense as it was a few years ago, and I'm wondering if that's because people think the game is getting safer, or are they kind of doing more research and saying, no sport is risk-free. You've got, looking at a recent study on concussion risks, and it mentions cheerleading. It mentions lots of different sports where there's some level of risk. And I know that may sound funny to some people, but the catastrophic injury rate in cheerleading is not really a laughing matter. Obviously, there are risks in all kinds of sports.
Yeah, I mean, there are risks in every sport. I mean, you look at soccer, basketball. A concussion can happen any time. But when you talk about concussions in football, and I think you look at the helmet companies are doing a better job of making a safer product. I think the coaching, the rule changes, as Marvin talked about earlier, have made the game safer. And then there's also groups like Advis, a football coaching program that teaches coaches how to teach tackling, how to tackle the right way, take your head out of the game, tackle with your shoulder. You know what I mean? Tackle the right way when you learn how to play the game. Then that goes up through the ranks. They're working with high schools, they're working with youth leagues, they're working with teams like Oklahoma and NFL teams as well. And it's just that important to learn how to tackle the right way, because you can take a lot of the brunt out of football. It's always going to be that dangerous sport because it's a high contact sport, but you can make it a little bit safer.
All right, Clay, I'm wondering where you see the game going. You mentioned how I think you feel like it would be a loss if it went away. Do you feel like health concerns eventually will get rid of it, or do you think this is sort of a reform period and it gets safer and continues on and remains popular?
Well, I think the great thing, it's already been talked about here, is how football evolves. And what you've already seen with some of these spread offensive attacks is pure bulk is not as important as it used to be in football, right? You want faster, leaner, sometimes guys who are able to spread the field and get out and cover ground faster and quicker. And that can change the way the game evolves. Even the running game, you see the value of a guy like Ezekiel Elliott or Melvin Gordon has continued to decline as the passing game has increased. The value of individual positions on the field substantially altered, protecting the quarterback's blind side, the quarterback, the cornerback. It's a passing league now, and so all the valuation has been attached to that. I think ultimately people like violence, right? I mean, that's one reason why football works. And so you have to balance out the risk.
Do you like the violence, or I mean, to put it maybe a nicer way is to say you admire the courage
well, they're
that it takes to
gladiators,
play.
right? I mean, if you were trying and compare, say, to ancient Rome, the gladiator came out and he might not come off the gladiatorial circle, right? He might finish out there. And I think our modern day version of gladiatorial combat is by and large, on the football field. Now you got MMA and you've got certainly boxing, but I would say in general, football is where most fans go to get that kind of hyper-masculine combat. I actually think a lot of the coverage about negativity in the NFL is from people who don't like football being so intensely masculine of a sport. I think that sometimes threatens people. And so I think there's sometimes negativity associated with that. But I got 3 young boys. Sometimes you need to channel their frustration and their energy into something where they can learn and be able to use that sort of aggression in a positive way within the context of a sport.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering, Marvin, when you were playing, were you thinking, wow, this is really violent and dangerous and I'm going to pay for it someday? Or did you love the game and you had that competitive spirit and
No, I thought I was going to live forever.
Everybody does when you're
And
20
I
years
sort
old.
of played in the dark ages, like I call it, because right now the players, they have the information at the end of their fingertips. We didn't know anything about CTE. We didn't know anything about some of the chronic pain that former players dealt with. And so we just went out and played. And so I was very aware of football is a physical game, it's a violent game, and the more teams, and if your defense was like that, the better chance you had to win. So I was all dialed into it. Now, 20 years later, looking back at it, would I have done something different? I can't say I would have, because I only knew how to play football one way, and that was 100% full speed, all out, let's go. Strap it up on Sunday and let's go.
And so the game has changed a bit since then. We've been talking, Eric, about the safety concerns and reasons why you want it to change in some ways. But this sort of more of a speed finesse game, is this good for the game? Put aside the health concerns. Do you think it's a better competitive game as you watch it now from when you played?
Well, I certainly think that fans love it more. There's more points being scored. I think some of the rules have kind of swayed to the offensive side of the ball. They're replaying pass interference now. The spacing of the game. I saw the evolution of that as a player. When I got drafted, I played safety. There were a lot of safeties that were 220 pounds. You talk about Sean Taylor, a lot of big-time safeties. As I played in the league through the years, cornerbacks started moving to the safety position because it's a spread-out game that you have to be able to defend against the pass, and the game got more athletic. The guys got smaller, they got more athletic, and that does lead to more collisions, but it leads to a very exciting game.
And we've been talking about making it safer, and then this is obviously an emphasis as people are coaching kids to play. But you've also got a phenomenon, and this is beyond football, of sports at youth levels have just gotten much, much more serious. Do you look at this, Marvin, and say this is great? People are developing their skills and pursuing something other than trouble they might get into, or do you say it's kind of gone too far?
No, I think it's great that the kids are in sports. The thing that I think is the issue is the specialized athlete, because if you talk to any general manager or coach, they'll tell you the best athletes are the ones that play multiple sports and were really diverse. Now, the thing that's happening in the youth sports is these travel teams and these AAU teams and these elite teams, which are pricing a lot of kids in the urban and rural areas out. I think that they should all be free, and kids should be able to play multiple sports, and then they can pick and choose when they're a junior or senior year in high school. Because I played multiple sports, and it didn't hurt me, and I think it made me more well-rounded instead of just specializing on that one sport.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering, given this sort of specialization, and I see it, people just focusing it much more intensely at a much earlier age, they may have opportunities other people don't have. But as you suggest, I'm not sure the kid who's specializing is better off if it's one sport all the time.
I don't think he is, and I don't think it benefits him as an athlete or as a person. And you want a well-rounded athlete, student athlete that's going to hit your college campus instead of just focusing in. He's been in the gym all summer or all his life, or he's been out on a baseball diamond. And now you're starting to see the next generation that's came out of that specialization. When you kind of talk to them and they're in their late 20s and early 30s, they wish they would have played another sport.
Yeah.
Because they know that, maybe I should have done this, or maybe my body, or maybe I should have played this sport, and it makes you well-rounded. And playing one sport, I think it kind of limits you.
Is this kind of just a nationwide phenomenon everywhere in terms of just much more serious? I think a lot of people growing up at my age or older, they didn't really do sports seriously until high school.
I think our society has just become so much more competitive. I remember when I was in summer, out for school, I was at home all day by myself. And there were a lot of other kids at home all day by ourselves too. I've got an 11, an 8, and a 4-year-old. I think they had 2 weeks where they didn't have things scheduled during the entire summer. Right? That wasn't me. That wasn't.
Wait a minute, I was going to ask whose fault is that?
No, it's not. It's my wife, right? I think, in all honesty, you got, and she stays home with the boys. But what you end up with is a lot of times you have parents who are trying to make sure that their kids get all the advantages that maybe they didn't have growing up. I didn't go to sleepaway camp, right? I didn't go to very many camps at all to do anything other than, like I said, I was at home all day by myself. Maybe watching the Cubs or watching the back in the day when they would play in the middle of the afternoon. And so I think there's a fear out there among parents that if you don't do it, somebody else's kids are doing it. And so it's kind of like looking at the neighbor, looking at what everybody else is doing, and they're like, oh, Johnny got a lot better in the off season because he played travel baseball or travel soccer or whatever it is. What I think is right here is statistics have shown that generalizing and playing a lot of different sports develops those talents, and then by the time you come into puberty and adolescence, you have more better rounded skills to pursue whatever you end up loving.
Yeah, I
and you don't get burned out. Look at the number of kids now getting Tommy John surgery when they're like 11 years old.
Repetitive stress injuries. Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Do you, I don't know, do you get parents asking you, my third grader looks like he's got tons of potential to play in the NFL, what do I need to do right now?
Absolutely, and I think you see a lot of these parents getting obsessed with having their kids play at that next level. But a lot of the pressure is coming from the coaches, from the programs. They see it as a moneymaker. Let me see, if he can play lacrosse all year, we can guarantee our income throughout the year, and it's unfair to the kids. If they want to go play in another sport, they're penalizing them, not letting them be the starter on the team because you missed a lacrosse for baseball practice. And I think that takes away from the kids. You talked about being burnt out. These kids are getting tired by the time they're in high school. I don't want to do it anymore. I've been playing baseball year round since I was 7 years old. I don't want to do it anymore. And I think playing multiple sports, it makes it fun. I used to look forward to baseball season after a long basketball season. And then in the summertime, getting ready for football and playing some baseball and mixing things up. And it did make me a more well-rounded athlete and a better person because you're meeting people from different demographics, different areas, and it just molds you as a person.
Wanted to hit another issue. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy the last few years. The Colin Kaepernick national anthem issue for the NFL. Do you see this as having run its course, the league is now settled with Kaepernick, or do you think this is a sort of a permanent feature of the league where people are going to have different views and they're going to express them through the game, through the pregame, whatever it is?
Yeah, well, I think in the age that we live in now with social media and people having their own opinions, this is not the end of it. I think that it will continue. I don't know if guys will continue to kneel, during the national anthem, but I think athletes and actors and people in the eye have seen that they have a voice, and that whatever their opinion is, it really does matter. And I think it's important for that. People go to sports. You talked about sports being the wall breaker. It makes it to where the CEO can talk to the janitor about their favorite baseball team or their football team. Well, people go to watch sports to get away from all that, but that means it's the perfect time because everyone's watching. Let's talk about these issues that are going on in the world and try to make a difference as a nation.
Yeah, it does seem like this may be just a permanent feature. I notice just in terms of the audience is there, the platform is there. Do you expect this to change or more controversy this year?
I think the interesting question is, and well, first of all, it's going to be controversial next year in 2020, right? Because we got an election going on. Who knows who will run against each other? So it's not as if sports is immune from whatever the rest of the nation is talking about. So I think next year, as everything gets sort of cooked up, headed into November of 2020, it will be wild. From my book that I wrote, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. Jordan has never officially claimed that he said it, but he was asked why he didn't get involved in politics. And there is a reason, I think, why Michael Jordan is still the most popular athlete in the country. And that is, in fact, his shoes have outsold all other current NBA players combined, even to this day. And I think it's because he appealed to everyone with his excellence in sports and allowed that to be sort of the hallmark that he sold of his brand. I think guys that are younger today are much more active on social media, and that's great, but social media is about fulfilling typically a niche, right? Like you find somebody who likes what you're doing and you give them more of it. To me, the Michael Jordans of the world, back before we knew about his dark side, the Bill Cosbys of the world, trying to appeal to the entire universe of the audience, I feel like we've kind of lost that opportunity. And I understand the idea of wanting to share your political views, whatever they may be. I think doing it in uniform at work is probably not good in the larger context for the business.
I'm not sure it's fair to compare Jordan to Bill Cosby, but on the quote
Or Tiger Woods would be another example of a
the
guy.
quote you were referencing.
Yeah.
The title of your book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, that was his answer to someone saying, why didn't you
get involved in a North Carolina Senate campaign? There's
Right.
Jesse Helms versus
Harvey
yeah,
Gantt.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was his response. And you can argue and fault him for that if you would like. But I think his idea was, and that was the era that he lived in, where a lot of us grew up. You'd sit down with your family and watch, the Cosby Show or Growing Pains or whatever those sitcoms were. The idea is you're trying to appeal to everyone, and I think that was Jordan's brand.
Do you, I guess I don't want to compare Jordan to Kaepernick in terms of athletic status, but in terms of different ways to approach the game, do you think we're going to see more of the Jordan model or more of the Kaepernick model?
I think you're going to see a combination of both. And if you go back to the etymology of social and equity protests, it started in the 60s with the counterculture athletes of Jim Brown and Ali and Tommy Smith and those guys. And then we kind of got away from it, which I had two heroes in the 1970s. I had Muhammad Ali and the guy that made it into the mainstream, O.J. Simpson. And so he was number one, apolitical guy, wasn't involved in politics, and we kind of took the mantle with that. The athletes in the 80s and 90s, led by Michael Jordan, who wanted to kind of sell shoes and sell Gatorade and what have you.
Yeah.
And now you have a more socially conscious athlete because they have their own platforms, and a lot of news sources and things are coming into them, so they're speaking out about it. So I'm fine with either way you want to go, because it's you as an individual, and it's freedom of speech and it's freedom of choice.
Do you, so Kaepernick, he has settled with the league. But
He settled, Jay-Z's came in, but I think, you got a lot of guys like Malcolm Jenkins and Kenny Sales and the Bennett brothers that are still pushing that social part, and the owners, I believe they've given over $500 million to social justice causes. So I think that's progress, and like I said, I think it's going to be a combination of both.
And so do you think Kaepernick, he's talked about maybe coming back, just purely as a football player? Could you see him back?
What else is he going to come back as? He's a football player. But
Okay.
saying all that, I said 3 weeks ago that I foresee Kaepernick being in an NFL uniform this year. And I'm standing by that because I think we all know why he was protesting and what have you. And if the team needs a quarterback, I think they need to look at him, because there's no way there's 90-something quarterbacks in the world better than Colin Kaepernick.
Okay, well, one team that may or may not need a quarterback, the Indianapolis Colts, Eric. We'll see whether they can make do without Andrew Luck, or if they're going to be searching for a free agent soon. There's been some commentary about his decision. He decided he did not want to go through another injury rehab cycle, and so he retired just before the start of the year. I think he seems to have played the game very hard through a lot of pain and very well for a number of years. I guess one question I would have is, for his teammates, was the timing kind of rough for his decision, given that they're about to start the year?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question, just because it's a personal situation. Andrew Luck has been a warrior in this game for a long time. He's taken way more hits than most quarterbacks in the NFL. He's played with lacerated kidneys, broken bones. He's one as tough as they come. And for people to get on him about being tired of going through the rehab. You know, I broke my leg in the NFL season. I understand what it takes to get back to the playing form, and then when you get back, you're not the same. And then having another injury, another setback, it's frustrating. It's hard, and it's taxing on yourself, it's taxing on your family. And so I applaud Andrew Luck for retiring when he did, because that's what his heart wasn't in it. You know, if you're expecting this guy to lead your team, he's your quarterback, he's the field general, he's the ambassador of your team, and his heart isn't fully in it, then you're shorting the team. You're shorting the guys on the team, and you're setting a bad example. So I applaud him for making that decision. I congratulate him on a great career. And listen, everybody's not built to have a Tom Brady career.
Right.
Everyone's not built for that. You know, fortunately for him, he handled his business in the classroom. He has some things after football that he can look forward to. But most importantly, he wants to have his health.
I think the question people should ask is, how many people would continue to go to work if they had $100 million in the bank? Right? I think you could take it outside of the world of football, and I think this speaks to the growth of the NFL brand overall, particularly if you're a highly successful quarterback. There's a tiny percentage of people that win $100 million in the lottery and go in, whatever they do, guys, the next day and go to work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what's happening is the dollar figures are getting significant enough. You can be great at something and not love it.
Yeah.
I really do believe that Andrew Luck is a great quarterback, but he looked at it and he said, look, I got $100 million. I'm starting a new family. I enjoy doing this. I don't love it. And there's something else in his passion, in his life. Maybe that'll change when he comes back healthy. I still think there's a decent chance, guys, he could come back. But I think that's what this is about more than anything else is he's got as much money, more than he can spend in his mind and his life. He's a smart guy. He's got a lot of other interests.
Yep.
He doesn't need to play football to feel fulfilled.
Okay, wanted to get to one other topic before we go, and that is we mentioned Indianapolis. Are there particular places you loved to play or hated to play? Were there places where you thought it was a great situation, or teams where you said, I wish I could have played in that city. That was the most amazing football town.
Well, if you look back, when you're looking over the NFL landscape, there are a few iconic franchises that you probably want to be a part of. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers and New England Patriots, and then during my era, it was the Dallas Cowboys. And luckily, I was able to play with a good organization. Mike Shanahan up in the Broncos, but that came out of San Francisco, and I was able to play for them too. So I saw the two systems. They were very similar. They treated their players well. They had a winning attitude, and you were expected to win. And then I saw, 1-15 and 3-13 a bunch of times, but not that the Jets was a bad organization. We just couldn't figure it out on the football side. But a guy coming out of college trying to get drafted, he's a football player, and it doesn't matter where he gets drafted because it fulfills his dream of playing in the NFL. Now, as a free agency, you can kind of pick and choose, but the iconic franchises, just like, if you're a baseball player, you want to play for the Yankees or Red Sox or the Cubs or the Dodgers.
Well, you mentioned the Steelers. I mean, that's a town that, at least from my perspective, seems to be all about that team in a way that maybe some other cities aren't, where it's just, especially if Steelers are in the playoffs, it kind of dominates the entire local conversation. And I don't know, Eric, if there were other places you saw that you thought, wow, that's a special culture, or I need to avoid that one.
Well, Pittsburgh was one of those places.
Yeah.
When I was a rookie, we played the Steelers twice in that season. One in the regular season, and once the second time in the first round of the playoffs. And it was a Saturday game. We pull up on Friday, and people are going to work with their business suits with their Steelers jerseys on. And it was mind-boggling, how many fans they had there. But, another place is obviously New England. Playing for the Jets, playing against that organization for years. They've done it the right way. You hate them as a player.
Well,
and I mean, you hate them as a player, and I still do. But I have a ton of respect for, how they go about their business and the consistency they've had throughout these years.
Is there an NFL city that stands out to you, Clay?
I live in one, Nashville, which is my hometown that I absolutely love. But if you are an NFL free agent right now and you don't immediately try to get on Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and the New England Patriots, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You might make a little bit less money, but if you're at the tail end of your career and you're pursuing a championship, I would just like to have that experience of having played with the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest coach potentially of all time. I think we'll be talking about it for the rest of our lives.
Okay, well, we can go into a few of the asterisks along the way.
I'm not saying they're flawless.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay, not flawless, but yeah, the record is quite amazing. Thanks, gents, for joining us today, and thanks to all of you We'll be back for another deep dive on Fox Nation tomorrow. Thanks.